What's up, Subaniacs? Thanks for joining me today here on my podcast, where every week I'll be talking to the greatest athletes, coaches, and entrepreneurs who've reached peak performance in their careers. We're going to get to the real stories and insights, hear from people inside the world of professional sports and beyond. It's totally unfiltered, and you're going to find out things about pro athletes and the folks behind the scenes that you never knew before. Welcome back. I'm your host, PK Subban, and DARWICHE, my producer, produces everything on my YouTube channel. Sports enthusiast, I mean, maybe not the most well-versed in hockey, but he's got an opinion.
Yeah.
And here on the show, we love opinions. So, Mo, what do we got today?
All right, let's jump into the sports news around the league right now. Professional sports industries upended by the pandemic.
Yeah.
Should the show go on? We have a lot of the players from the Miami Marlins just test positive for COVID-19.
15.
Now it's having them cancel some games coming into this hockey playoffs. What sort of stakes do we have here, and how could that affect the playoffs moving forward?
Oh, well, first of all, I mean, this is critical for the NHL. We need the revenue. It's going to be interesting. I mean, especially now, I think the biggest difference is, first, this is what gives the NHL the edge, in my opinion. Major League Baseball doesn't have a bubble, right? Am I correct?
Right.
There's been no bubble. They're traveling. It's going to be tough to keep numbers down, without having a bubble. NHL's got a bubble. I've spoken to a few players, some people in the bubble. I think it's difficult for guys to imagine what it's going to be like being in the bubble for 2 months. Not all the players obviously are going to be there for 2 months, but right now everybody's just kind of getting settled. This is the new reality. We have to get used to this. And the one thing that fans got to realize is that there's a history for some of the experienced players in the league. There's a history of preparation for the playoffs. You get Justin Williams, like this Mr. Game 7. How many playoffs has this guy been in? He's got a routine. Well, you could take that routine and scrap it based on where he's going to be, the setting that he's in. So guys are going to have to get used to, not being able, or get used to a new routine, I guess you could say.
Well, let's get into that, right?
Like,
you're taking away a home field advantage right now, right? How does that play into these playoffs where everyone is on even playing field?
Well, first of all, I was talking to Johnny Gaudreau actually on Saturday. I spoke to him briefly, and I was actually interviewing him on a different segment. And I asked him, I said, listen, Calgary Flames, you guys got a young team. The core group has been there for a while now. I think they're one of those teams that's been good for a while. They had Tkachuk come in, sort of add some spice to that group. They play with a little bit more flair. But the one thing about Calgary that I always knew, that since I've been in the league, every time you go, into Calgary, they feed off the energy of the crowd. They always come out flying. And I asked Johnny, I said, Johnny, this is going to be different for you guys. Like, you guys aren't going to have that crowd to feed off of. And yeah, there's other teams that we can talk about, Nashville, Montreal, that got great fan base, but specifically to Calgary, they're a different team when they play at home. So, I think it's going to be interesting from that standpoint. But let's be honest, the NHL's only gotten younger every year. So there's going to be a lot of hungry players that want to come out and make a name for themselves during this time. It's a sprint. It's not a marathon. For us older guys, it might still be a marathon. For these young guys, they're approaching it as a sprint.
Do you feel like the younger teams may have the advantage because they're already going in not knowing what to expect? So because of that, they're more malleable. They could just have more energy, go after it.
It's difficult to say. I was asked this weekend about what I thought. Sorry, I was asked this week about what I thought, who I thought would be the team to win it all. And it's tough because I think of the Colorado Avalanche, team that I played against in the playoffs the past few years, that's definitely ready to make that jump. But how do you rule out Boston? I mean, find me a team that's going to be able to shut down that top line. It's that top line, Pasternak, Marchand, Bergeron, in my opinion, one of the best, if not the best line in hockey right now. They're rested. You have to take that into account. And when we're talking about rest now, let's pivot to the St. Louis Blues, who's my pick to win the Stanley Cup championship. And I'm going to tell you why. Rest is key. They needed the rest, right? Let's take it back to the regular season before this whole pandemic started. We're in New Jersey. Our team's battling to try to fight and claw to get back into the playoff picture. And who are we looking down? We see it coming down the calendar, the St. Louis Blues. And as they're coming down the calendar, they're winning, and they're winning, and they're winning, and they're not losing. And they get into the Prudential Center. They get to the Rock on a 9-game winning streak. We come out for this game. Our guys are ready. We're ready to play. I remember this game specifically because me personally, I'm saying these guys aren't going to come in here and embarrass us. It's not going to happen. And we were ready to go right from the drop of the puck. We played one of our best games during the season that night. We ended up winning the game. But I'm going to tell you this. We played one of our best games during the season. I think St. Louis was playing at probably 75, 80%. And it went right down to the wire. So this team, a mix of veterans, youth, coaching clearly when you win a championship, goaltending's there. Listen, they went through a little bit of stuff with Jay Bouwmeester. I think they're just refocused. I think that team's going to be focused. It's a veteran team with solid youthful players that play the right way. And I don't see who's going to beat them. Maybe the Leafs with the youth and the speed and the skill that they have can overpower teams and get a good jump on teams. But St. Louis is my pick.
Well, let's talk about depth then, right?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about COVID. If a player tests positive, they're basically out for 14 days.
Done.
Right? So how does that affect the depth then that these teams have? Because you're talking about great teams that have great players, but a couple of those guys get out of the lineup, 3-4 guys test positive, it's wide open.
Well, let's go back to what I said before we started the segment. The NHL, in my opinion, is in the best position right now moving forward from a league perspective, from a safety perspective. And that's not me just pumping the NHL's tires. I mean, I don't care. This is my podcast, my show. I'm going to keep it real. The NHL, from what I know, has set up the bubble in a way where I think guys are going to be protected. Their safety's there. You look at what's happened in the NBA, guys kind of bouncing in and out of the bubble. For whatever reason it is, whether they get permission or they don't get permission, I mean, that's just putting everything at risk, right? So, and we see what's happening in Major League Baseball. There's the NFL also that we have to consider. But I think the NHL right now, with what they've created, I haven't seen in too many holes yet. So, but at any moment, this whole thing could shut down. It's crazy. At any moment, all it takes is someone to get it to spread quickly. And now we're at a crosshairs here where we got to make decisions. So.
Right. All right. Going into these playoffs, PK, we've been talking about prep, right?
Yeah.
How much prep plays into this. Routines play into this. Routines are upended. Preparation's upended in the sense that everyone's experiencing this new thing for the first time.
I think that guys right now, it's still a little bit early. So I don't think there's any reason for anybody to be pessimistic right now about the bubble or the situation of the bubble. There's definitely going to be an adjustment for players. Guys are used to being able to be at home and being able to sleep in their own bed, and you're in a hotel room now, and it's a different script. I think that as far as guys changing things, to maybe feel a little bit more comfortable in the bubble, you got to be careful with that. Because I know that being in the playoffs, whenever I've played there, I've always gotten into a routine. And I remember being in the Stanley Cup final, and I'm getting ready for the Stanley Cup final. We beat Anaheim. We got a couple days off, and I reach out to Kobe. And I was very, lucky to have a relationship with Kobe as far as texting goes. I met him in his last game in Boston at TD Garden when they played the Celtics, and I came in. And I think people have seen the picture on my Instagram where he's got the ice bags, and he was nice enough. And I said, Kobe, listen, I'd love to get your number and connect with you and get some information from you. I really want to add something to my game. And he said, hey, listen, here's my number. Message me anytime. So during the summer, I'd be training and I'd get up early and I'd send him videos and Mamba mentality and you know what I mean? And he'd always respond. He was very, 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 very good to me, you know? And I always felt that I was spoiled to have that relationship with him because, you know, I put Kobe on a pedestal of Michael Jordan and these types of athletes. And, you know, I don't consider myself there, but to have that relationship with him was special to me. But we get to the Stanley Cup final. And I said, Kobe, do you ever have trouble sleeping before games? Like, you know, I'm having, like, I want to change something up. Like, you know, what do you do to get to sleep? I said, do you drink wine? Like, what do you do? Like, he's like, yeah, he's like, I'll have a glass of wine. He's like, what do you do? And I said, well, you know, if I drink wine, it's got sugar in it. So I'll like, it speeds up my heart and then I get tannins going. And he said, okay, well, I said, Kobe, like, what would you be doing now to prepare for the Stanley Cup final? Like, this is my first Stanley Cup final. I really want to play well. I really want to be ready to go. You know, what should I do? And he goes, well, what do you always do? And I go, what? He goes, well, you got to the Stanley Cup final. You've always been a playoff performer. Why change anything? So I think, you know, when Kobe told me that right away, it was just like, you know, sometimes you have all the answers. And I think it's what's important for players going into the bubble is to realize that you're going to be able to eat the same food. It's essentially the same preparation. It's just a different setting. That shouldn't change your approach or your mindset in going into it, you know? And I think that like, you're going to be able to bring everything that you want into that bubble that you need. Stick to the plan. And for some of these players, not all of them are going to be there for 2 months. Like I said earlier, some of these guys are only going to be there for a couple of weeks and that's it, right? So, you know, just go in, stick to what you've always done. And I think players like I said, the veteran players like Justin Williams and these guys, I think are going to find ways to keep that focus on how they've always done it.
Well said.
Yeah. So, you know, that was my thing with Kobe.
Well, let's get into the broadcasting of it. Obviously, the NHL wants to do things differently. They don't want to have fake posters of people in the stands, right? Like the MLB's been doing, right? They really want to create a one-of-a-kind, unique environment where we'll have 32 cameras, a whole new way of televising live sports. What do you think the fans can expect from what the NHL is bringing from a broadcast standpoint?
To be honest, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, listen, you know, when I look at it now, there's a lot of people out of jobs. Like, you know what I mean? I don't think every broadcaster is going to be back on the air traditionally that we're used to seeing.
Right.
I think it's going to change up a little bit. So I haven't heard too much on the broadcasting. You know, I think that, listen, we've seen the NBA play a couple games. Until the real thing starts, it's hard to say. You know what I mean? There's not much going on right now. I think people are getting sick of Netflix.
Yeah.
I think people are getting sick of Hulu and HBO, and they're all great shows. I mean, I'm still watching my shows.
Right.
Am I going to watch hockey? I'm going to watch hockey.
Yeah.
I'm going to watch hockey. I'm going to see what's going on. I'm excited for it. I'm a little bit tentative on being 150% sports coming back to play.
Yeah. Well, I think we're all just going to find out how it plays out here. And let's go back real quick from a player standpoint. You score a goal, right? You have tens of thousands of people cheering for you. Now you score a goal in this current environment, and there might be some NHL 20 audio being played. Are players going to get as pumped on the scoring or the hits or these things that take place when you don't have an audience there and when all you have is some fake audio being pumped in through the loudspeakers?
Well, I got a question. If you're playing the Boston Bruins, Brad Marchand's going to be playing exactly the same way. If you're expecting anything different from a player like Brad Marchand, if you don't think you're getting a stick, if you don't think you're getting a cross check, if you don't think he's going to run you over when you're not looking, you're sadly mistaken. The Stanley Cup is on the line. The moment that puck drops, it's on. I don't think the real gamers and the players are going to perform when there's something on the line. And it's either you're a gamer or you're not. And I think that those types of players, they're salivating. I'm watching a clip on the NHL's Instagram, literally maybe an hour ago, and it's showing the Bruins practice. And I'm watching Brad Marchand run over one of his teammates in like a battle drill. So that's in practice. That's not even. So I think players that know what's at stake understand that when you're playing for a Stanley Cup, it doesn't matter if you want to say, call it legit, call it not legit. It's an opportunity to raise something that not a lot of guys have had an opportunity to raise. So I think guys are going to be ready to go. I think it's going to matter. I think guys would prefer to have fans in the stands, but as time goes on, games go on, I think it's going to matter less and less.
So let's get into the new structure of the playoffs here with the NHL, with the round robin. Do you feel that there's a competitive advantage perhaps to either the people in the round robin who might get more rest and see different teams, or the people who are automatically jumping into the qualifying?
Everybody's rested. I think these guys have been skating for a while now. So you got to think that for the teams that knew that were in the playoff picture, I mean, if you stopped skating once it was paused, it's kind of like, I think everybody's going to be in skating shape. As far as the actual game goes, that's a different situation. But you got to think that training camp, they're ramping it up, right? Like these guys, like I said, you see on the NHL Instagram, Brad Marchand kind of getting physical in practice. Guys are going to challenge each other. I mean, remember, guys are practicing right now, getting ready to win a Stanley Cup. Like it's not, you're not getting ready for the play. You're getting ready to win a Stanley Cup in sort of a sprint situation here. Guys are going to be ready to go. I do think that the veteran teams, like for instance, if we go into the round robin where our teams are going to be battling for that top spot, the seeds, I think there's a little bit more experience there with a team like a St. Louis, where I think that, there's no home ice. Nobody's battling for home ice here. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't think it's going to be as big of a factor as people think, the extra time of waiting. I think it's a sprint. Like I said, the intensity is going to be ramped up. Guys have been waiting for a long time. I think it's going to be intense right from the drop of the puck. I don't see there to be a huge lag in any of these teams.
Is there an advantage to teams that are in the qualifying rounds are going to be playing elimination hockey right away? Mm-hmm. Teams that are in the seeding rounds or that are being seeded are not playing elimination hockey. So do you feel that there's an advantage perhaps, or is there a level of intensity? Because if I'm Tampa, Boston, Washington, or Philly, right, I could lose 3 games in a row and I'm still in it, right? Whereas if I'm Pittsburgh versus Montreal, it's all or nothing. Okay. I got to win best of 5.
Okay, but let's go to the round robin for a second.
Right.
Let's look at the teams. In the East, you got Tampa, Boston, Washington, Philly.
Right.
In the West, you got St. Louis, Colorado, Vegas, Dallas. I'm going to name a group of teams, and then I'm going to tell you why I named them. Tampa, Boston, Washington, St. Louis, Vegas, Dallas. And you could probably put Colorado in there as far as experienced teams go. So you got 7. You got 7 teams. The only team maybe Philly, but they got Claude Giroux and some other experienced players on that team. I just think the experience that's there. Like, are you telling me that Zdeno Chara and Patrice Bergeron aren't going to have their team ready to go? Like, they're going to have their team ready to go. You don't think St. Louis is going to be ready to go? You don't think Colorado, that's been waiting for this opportunity, right? You don't think Cale Makar, who's a young player who just had a standout, you don't think he's going to be fired up and ready to go? You don't think Nathan McKinnon's going to be galloping through the neutral zone? Like, these guys are going to be ready to play. It's the Stanley Cup playoffs. There's no time to sit around and say, oh, well, I wish we had more tune-up games. No, man. You guys have had 4 months to get ready. Like, you can ramp up the intensity. I'd be ready to go. So I don't think there's going to be a huge lag for any of these teams. I think these teams are going to be ready to go. And then if we pivot to the qualifying round.
Let's do it. Let's jump right in. Let's start to preview some of this with the Eastern Conference. You have number 5.
I think this is where it gets tough. This is where it gets tough. This is where it's going to be really interesting. If we're going to start Eastern Conference.
Yeah, let's start there. We'll start with number 5 Pittsburgh Penguins facing off against the number 12 Montreal Canadiens.
Listen to me. You got Crosby and Malkin. They're rested. That is going to be probably the most interesting series because of one player, in my opinion, and one player only, Carey Price. Carey Price can steal that series. That can happen. That can happen. Now, he's gonna need some help because it's gonna be. But if he gets hot, forget about it. I think I can see Montreal taking that series. But I'm gonna tell you, I do not bet against Sidney Crosby. I've beaten him once in the playoffs. I've lost to him probably in the most important series in the Stanley Cup final. I know what he's capable of doing. All he needs is he just needs a breath of space, man. And he can end a game. He can change the series. As long as that guy's on the ice. And listen, I also think that, if I'm Sidney Crosby, there's a lot of talk about some of these other players. And listen, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, people talk about him being the MVP of the league. Listen to me. The best player in the league is still Sidney Crosby. That's how I feel. No disrespect to Connor McDavid. I love him. Connor McDavid is right there. There's no question about it. What he does on the ice, there's nobody in the world that can do what he does. No question. Leon Draisaitl, big, fast, can play both ends of the puck. But I'm Sidney Crosby, 3 Stanley Cup rings, okay? He does it all, and he's proven that he can do it in the biggest moments on any stage. You don't bet against Sidney Crosby. So if I'm taking a team, I'm taking Pittsburgh, but I still believe that Montreal can steal that series.
All right, number 6, Carolina Hurricanes versus number 11, New York Rangers.
That's going to be a tough series. That is going to be a fun series to watch. I think that if New York can pick up where they kind of left off, they were hot ending the season. But if you remember, they kind of struggled a little bit. They struggled with consistency throughout the season. So there's no room to be inconsistent now. You have to come out. And the thing is with Carolina's team is sort of built for this type of format. They can play a solid defense. They got a lot of players with good sticks. They play both sides of the ice. They got veteran presence in that room with Justin Williams. They got a coach behind the bench who's been through the wars, who's played in the NHL, understands it. I think that their game plan, it's going to come down to coaching that series. And I think Carolina, they got so much juice. The past couple of years, they've kind of progressing. I think that Sebastian Aho is unbelievable, and he's annoying, and he scoots around the ice. He's got a good stick. He's smart. He plays the game at a pace that not a lot of guys can play at. He's going to be tough to contain in this series. And New York's got mobile defense, but I think with Carolina, they make it so hard on you to break out of your zone. And I think that with this time off, it's going to come down to coaching and execution. And Carolina, I can tell you this, they're one of as a defenseman, has played in this league for a long time, they're one of the toughest teams to break out of your zone in. And if you can't get out of your zone here, now all of a sudden, guys are sucking wind. Guys are gripping the sticks tight because they're not in the best skating shape. You're not in the most game shape. And there's going to be a lot of turnovers. And turnovers, you can't be turning the puck over to a guy like Sebastian Aho in the playoffs. He's going to bury it. And they got, Jordan Stahl. They got a lot of guys on that team that play both sides of the puck so well. So Carolina, maybe I'm edging to them, but if New York picks up where they left off, listen to me, New York can be moving on. So
I'm going to go with Carolina based on the pros you threw in that. Number 7, New York Islanders versus number 10, Florida Panthers.
Tough series once again. These are two teams. The thing is, there's so much parity in the NHL.
Right.
That's why I think that fans are so eager to watch because there's so much parity. I mean, no one can flat out say who's going to win the Stanley Cup this year. As a player, I can give you my opinion based on the guys I play against every night and what I've seen over the past couple of years, but there's so much parity. And these two teams, New York Islanders, horrible down the stretch, right? And not horrible team, just, you could just see there's just tough bounces and just things didn't go their way. They needed a bounce down the stretch, but I look at their team and let's break it down. It starts with Matthew Barzal. In my opinion, when you talk about guys that are dynamic, that can change a game, that are game breakers in the NHL, you mentioned Connor McDavid, right? You mentioned Panarin in New York. You got to put Barzal in that category. And I can tell you this right now, it's a skating game, and there's very few guys that can skate like that guy. And in a short sprint format like this, I can see him lighten it up, and he could steal a series. Like Carey Price, he's that important to that team. And I think that, listen, they got veteran presence now in that locker room. That's what I like about the New York Islanders. They're a two-way team. And coaching, you got Barry Trotz, right? Won a Stanley Cup. He understands how to get his team to play the right way. I think that those guys now also taking time with this break are going to be looking at it and saying, you know what? We got sort of a second wind here. We got a good bounce here to take a break. Now we're not even focused on the regular season and how we ended. Forget that. This is a brand new season. And if the Islanders play to their capabilities, listen to me, the Islanders can be a team that's in the Stanley Cup final. They're that good. Yeah. So I'm just saying, with Nick Leddy on the back end, he can skate, move pucks, veteran presence. You got Andy Green, who's a shot blocker. That's going to be huge because power plays, penalty kills, special teams are always huge in the playoffs. And I think for the Islanders, Andy Green just sits in perfectly. They got Pajot, who's no one's talking about that. That's a huge signing. He's a great player on special teams. So I like the Islanders, but Florida, if they're goaltending and we know who they got in net, signed the big contract, if he plays to his capabilities, he's just like Carey Price, he can steal a series. So that's going to be a fun one to watch. But if the Islanders play to their capabilities, I think the Islanders are taking that.
All right, number 8, Toronto Maple Leafs versus number 9, Columbus Blue Jackets.
Interesting series. A lot of people would like to compare that to when Tampa played Columbus. And, you know, we know what happened in that series with Columbus moving on. You know, this is going to be an interesting series because you got Austin Matthews, John Tavares, Mitch Marner, Willie Nylander, high octane offense. No.
Duds.
I mean, they can outscore you every game.
Yeah.
So we know that Columbus isn't going to get into a track meet with these guys. They ain't going to trade chances back and forth. So if I'm Columbus, I'm thinking, and trust me, I'm not John Tortorella, so I'm not trying to play coach here, but if I'm John Tortorella, you're going to clog up the neutral zone. You're going to force their defensemen to skate with the puck and try to make plays. And in that, they got players that can capitalize on turnovers. Cam Atkinson, Nick Foligno, all these guys can play. And they can contribute offensively. But the one thing you know you're getting with Columbus, you ain't getting a free pass. Another team, probably the second team in the league as far as forechecking goes, unbelievable forechecking team. And the question's going to be is, can the Toronto Maple Leafs defense hold up against their forecheck? Because we saw what they did to Tampa. They just kind of ran them out of the building. So, you know, is Columbus going to have their skating legs? So I can tell you this, John Tortorella as a coach, he's got a lot of respect in the league. He's going to make sure his guys are ready to play the system that he feels is best for them to win against the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I think it's going to be coaching again, but that is a toss-up. If the Leafs come out and their guys are scoring and they're confident, they can outscore a team like Columbus. But if Columbus slows the game down and clogs up the neutral zone, frustrates those players, I can see Columbus taking it as well. So it'll be a tight series. John Tortorella, though, I think coaching's going to be big. It's going to be a test for the Leafs. This is going to be a test. I'm interested to see how they respond. They got a lot of good players on that team. You know, so it'll be interesting. This is the test. And we saw when Washington had played them and said, you know what, they're not ready yet. They're close. You know, the jury's out on whether they can make that leap or not. I think they have all the players to do it. This is going to be an interesting situation, a tough test for them. But I want to see. It's a 5-game series.
So we got to pick one. If you got to pick one, who are you going? Leafs Jackets.
Oh.
Just one. Instinct.
If I got to pick one, I'm going to go with the Leafs.
Whew.
I'm going to go with the Leafs. But for Columbus Blue Jackets fans out there, it would not surprise me if Columbus took this series and took it fast. Like, that wouldn't surprise me. So,
all right, you heard it. Eastern Conference wrapped up. Western Conference, let's jump into that right now. We have number 5 Edmonton Oilers versus number 12 Chicago Blackhawks. Who do you have?
Well, listen, I'll tell you this. My brother's with Chicago. I know Corey Crawford's just coming off of COVID. You know, not sure what's going to happen in net there. But I think that with Chicago, this isn't a team that you have to look at and judge based on the past couple years. You have to look at this team as a competitive team. You know, I think they went through a little bit of a rebuild where they lost some players, some key pieces, and they got some younger players in there. But the one thing that I look at is when Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves are going, that team's going. It's very similar to Edmonton. When Connor McDavid and Draisaitl are going, they're a different team. I think that let's step away from those players for a second, because we know that McDavid and Draisaitl are going to do their thing. We know that Kane and Taves are going to do their thing. I think goaltending is going to be big because both teams are really good on the power play. So special teams is going to be huge, both penalty kill and power play. I think that's where the difference is going to be. Because when we played the Chicago Blackhawks in the playoffs and we swept them, the special teams was huge. That's where we really, in my opinion, took a lot of the confidence away from the Chicago Blackhawks. And I think both teams are built very similarly. Right? They pay those two players a lot of money. They drive a lot up front for them, and they deserve it. All those players deserve it because they're extremely talented. But I can tell you this, you shut those players down consistently on the penalty kill, they start second guessing a little bit. They're gripping the sticks tight. They got to change up sequences. They got to change up spots on the power play. They got to try different things. And, you know, you can't rule them out in a long series. But when we beat them in Nashville, when we beat Chicago, a lot of that had to do with us paying attention to those players and paying a lot of attention to special teams, trying to stay out of the box. So I think when I watch both of these teams play this year, and especially playing against them, I want to talk about James Neal, the real deal, for a second. Shout out to the real deal. Everybody knows the real deal is one of my homies. But I will say this, James Neal getting an opportunity when he fit into that power play, he's got a big body, can score goals. I think it's important to you can't overlook those players. Everybody wants to talk about Connor McDavid and Draisaitl and these guys. Guys like James Neal, who have played on great teams with great players, have played in the playoffs, are salivating at opportunities like this to have an impact. And I think that teams that have guys like that can step in. You know, in Chicago, it's a guy like Zach Smith who plays both sides of the puck, up and down. So I think this is going to be a fun series to watch. I think it's going to come down to special teams. And when it comes down to it, very hard to bet against Draisaitl and McDavid. Very, very, very difficult to do that. Not to put anything against Patrick Kane or Jonathan Taves or even my brother. You know, I want to see Chicago. So I guess I could say my heart is with Chicago, but my mind tells me that McDavid and the boys are going to figure it out.
Got it. Special teams wins it there. Yeah. Number 6, Nashville Predators versus number 11, Arizona Coyotes.
I'm picking Nashville Predators. First of all, I have a lot of teammates on that. I think a lot of those guys are ready to go. I've been in touch with all of them.
Roman.
Yeah, Roman Josi. Listen, Roman Josi would be my pick. And by the way, hold on. I want to say this out loud. John Carlson obviously had a monster year. And he's had a great career winning the Stanley Cup. And we can touch on the Norris side right now. You know, with his numbers, you know, is he going to get the Norris? I don't know. I think it's down to those two guys. Not to take anything away from Victor Hedman. Victor Hedman is an unbelievable hockey player. And I remember the last time I was at the NHL Awards, Victor Hedman won the Norris. I think I finished second or third. I'm not sure. But I was really happy for him because I know the way he plays the game and his accountability to the game. But those two guys, you know, I think Carlson and Josi, it's going to be between those two guys. And I always think that the NHL always waits a while before they give it out. And I think that the first round of the playoffs, everybody says that it doesn't have a factor, but I think it does. So, you know, I would look to all three of those guys looking to have a good start to the playoffs. But listen, if I'm picking a guy, I'm picking Roman Josi. Number one of the best captains I've played with, great leader, great teammate, but he's had a phenomenal year. This is the best year I think he's had in his career, and he deserves it. He's right there. He got the big contract. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure whenever you get that, but he performed this year. He deserves it. You know, but so does John Carlson. He had an amazing couple of years too. So it'll be interesting, but I'm going with Nashville in this series.
Sounds good. Roman's going to need to work on his NHL 20 skills,
and his face. If he can make some adjustments to his face, that'll help a lot.
Number 7, Vancouver Canucks versus the number 10 Minnesota Wild. Who you got?
Tough series. Minnesota, another team. I compare Minnesota to Chicago. You can't look at Minnesota like you've looked at them the past few years. They're a different team now. Kevin Fiala, ex-teammate of mine, steps in, now becoming one of the I think he's an all-star already, one of the top players in the league. He is going to be, I know he's frothing at the mouth to get going. I expect him to have a huge playoffs. They're going to have to contain him. He's very, very skilled. He's fast. Parise, now you bring him into the mix with Parise and all these guys. Minnesota's going to be a tough team to beat. Minnesota's always been good defensively too. So Vancouver's been clicking. Elias Pettersson, Brock Besser, friend of the show, love him. I just interviewed him. I asked him how they're feeling. They're loose going into the bubble. They're excited. I asked him how Quinn Hughes is looking. Says he looks better than he did when the season paused. So, Vancouver, young team, good core. That is going to be a fun series to watch. If I'm going to pick a team, I think I'm going to go with Minnesota. Why?
Wow.
Why do I go with Minnesota? I'm going to go with Minnesota because veteran presence. I think that both of these teams got a good mix of veteran and youth. Maybe Vancouver's a little bit younger. I'm not 100% sure. But I think Minnesota's got size. I think it's going to be physical. I think that they're good defensively. I also think, though, it's going to come down to goaltending and special teams. And you got a guy like Suter on the back end that can log big minutes and play that way. You got a defense core there that's experienced, has been together. Dumbo with the big shot. I like Minnesota's team going into the series.
All right, number 8, Calgary Flames versus number 9, Winnipeg Jets.
Tough series. It's going to go down. I think that's going down right to the wire. I think Johnny Gaudreau, if Johnny Gaudreau, Monahan, and Tkachuk can have a big, big series, they're going to have to match Blake Wheeler, Scheifele, Ehlers, Connor. They're going to have to match those guys. And those guys have been good for a very, very long time. Line, they play very well together. It's a lot of firepower. I think if you're picking a team, I don't think you can not pick Winnipeg in this situation. But in a short series like this, like I said, Gaudreau gets hot. Calgary's goaltender gets hot. Who knows? But Winnipeg, you got Hellebuck in net. You got the defense that they got. You got the firepower up front. You got Paul Maurice coaching. I'm going with Winnipeg.
Shout out to Betetto, fan of the show.
Thanks for watching my podcast. Make sure you please like and subscribe. Leave your comments below. Let us know potential guests you'd love to see me have on. And also, leave your questions because we will be doing Q&As in future episodes. Thanks for watching the podcast.
Yeah.